Both of our second presenters from AgriSafe are not able to make it today. So Laura, who is always on our AgriStress meeting, she's going to fill in today and talk about our mental health programs. She's going to give a short overview. So we're going to go ahead and give Maud a little bit more time. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And Maud, when you're ready, we're going to go ahead and let her start sharing. And she is going to talk to us something that we have never, ever talked about here on the AgriStress meeting before. And that is, she is working with ag advisors. So this is going to be good for all of us. We can pass on this information as much as possible. So Maud, when you're ready, you go ahead and take it
Great.
away.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. Carrie, I appreciate the invitation to speak. So, yeah, I'm Maud Powell. I have a couple hats I wear. I'm a farmer in southwestern Oregon, and I also work for Oregon State University Extension for the Small Farms program. And so I'm going to be talking about a program that we started about 2.5 years ago. We sometimes call it climate stress, sometimes call it ecological distress. Today, I'll be using the term ecological grief rather than climate grief because ecological grief actually encompasses a broader range of losses that farmers are experiencing, including those caused by urbanization and resource extraction, and not just climate change. Also, climate change has become politically charged, as many of us know, in some contexts. So, ecological frames the conversation around our interconnected systems and the full spectrum of environmental impacts that might be affecting farmers. But I want to talk for a minute about how I got into this work. My husband and I bought this property, Wolf Gulch Farm, in 1998. And it was an old cattle ranch. We were determined to grow lots of food on it and rehabilitate the land, which we did. We raised our two kids there. And we grew first produce that we were selling to farmers markets and then through a community supported agriculture program. We did all the things, we had lots of cover crop to build the topsoil. It was a class 2 soil, and we were able to develop about a foot of topsoil. And we had this wonderful life there. We were really committed to buying a piece of property and then staying put indefinitely. We felt like a lot of the problems in our culture and society are that people kind of move around so much. So we were really interested in just committing to this property, and that was kind of our highest value. But we did start to notice in about the 2010s that the weather out in Southern Oregon was getting hotter and drier. There were more frequent wildfires. So we kind of doubled down. We switched all of our irrigation to from overhead to drip tape to use less water. We started growing more crops that were drought tolerant. And I was working at Extension the whole time. I've been at Extension for almost 20 years. So I was working on climate adaptive farming practices and working with other farmers and bringing back kind of the latest and greatest technologies and research. But even so, we were still struggling. And so we ended up actually switching our cropping system to seed crops. So we grow certified organic vegetable and seed crops for 5 or 6 seed companies around the country. And that was great because we could cut off irrigation, by mid to late August in most of the crops. Um, and then in 2017, our creek dried up completely. So then we were reliant on winter rain catchment in our ponds. Um, and again, just kind of, struggling to make things work, but doing our best and just soldiering on. And then in 2021, in June, I think this is like a national group here, but some of you from the Northwest may remember the heat dome that happened in 2021 in the Northwest. So in Southern Oregon, I believe we had 21 days where the high temperature never below something like 101. Um, and so it was June, remember? I mean, it went into July, but we were just sort of blown away by the weather forecast. And so we went into triage mode. We started having to pump water from our lower pond to our upper pond, and you can see what happened to our lower pond. Um, and we were just kind of desperately trying to figure out which crops were most economically important for our farm business and keep those alive. It was a really difficult period for us, and we ended up purchasing water from Medford, from our closest town, and they would bring the water at night in trucks and put some water in our pond that would only increase the height about a half an inch. So it was really, really difficult time. And it was during that period that Tom and I kind of realized we were going to have to move if we wanted to keep farming. And this was just so devastating. We'd been on the property for 23 years. Tom had put everything into the property. We'd raised our kids there. It was just devastating. I started to notice then it was hard to sleep, it was hard to eat, it was hard to kind of come together to make those decisions that we needed to move forward. I was cutting corners on my farm chores, and the business suffered. I could really see, I could start to see these mental and behavioral impacts of these ecological changes we were facing. So at that point, I got interested in this topic of ecological stress and grief. And I'm defining them here as, ecological stress is just any stress caused by ecological changes that we're seeing in losses. It differs, stress can be great for us. Those deadlines that keep us up at night to help the ewes lamb in the spring get through a difficult birth or get all the flower bouquets made for farmers market the next day. That kind of stress can be great, but ecological stress tends to be ongoing and without resolution. Ecological grief is the natural response to loss or anticipated loss or changes due to ecological changes. And whenever I talk about ecological grief, I really like to underscore how natural it is, that it's actually an appropriate response to the type of losses and changes that we're seeing. So there's nothing pathological about it. There's no sickness. It's not a problem to be fixed, and it's not a sign of weakness. It's just this healthy sign that's showing.
Oops, you're muted. Sorry.
Oh no, how long have I been muted?
Just a
Just
moment. It was my
okay,
fault when I
okay,
was
great,
admitting
great. So
people. My
hopefully you
bad.
heard most of that. Sorry about that. Um, so we feel ecological grief because we are invested in something. That is, when you love something and you lose it or it changes in a significant way, then you experience grief. So it's really natural. What else do we know about ecological grief? Most of us are familiar with losing a close loved one or an animal companion. So we like to spend a little time differentiating. Ecological grief is just overwhelming. Um, you know, any grief can be overwhelming, but the loss of a loved one is discrete and it's finite. It's a person. By contrast, climate grief or ecological grief is ongoing and it has no resolution. So as a result of that overwhelming quality, many people kind of want to numb out or dissociate or distract themselves. It's too much to think about. And that is completely understandable as a reaction, but ultimately doesn't really serve us um, or or the environment very well. And it's just also really complicated. I saw this in my own experience. It's a multifaceted type of grief. We can feel anger at politicians for not doing more. We can feel terror when we read the latest scientific predictions or think about our children or grandchildren's future. Then we can feel guilt for the amount of carbon we're using or any other ways that we're participating in these ecological changes, confusion about our life choices, and then deep sadness as we see these losses. And then finally, it's considered to be a disenfranchised grief. So many griefs are supported culturally and societally. When we lose a loved one, there's a memorial service or there's a funeral. People bring flowers or meals or write cards. Obviously, it doesn't help the loss, but there is that social support and those cultural practices that provide a space and tools for a person to deal with their grief in the company of others. But we see with ecological grief, it's disenfranchised. We currently don't have social and cultural supports for processing those types of grief. Um, and it's not really the kind of thing you want to bring up at a party. No one really wants to hear about it. It's depressing and overwhelming. Various groups have been tracking opinions about climate and ecological grief for decades, and they're just really now starting to look into the emotional and mental health responses. There has been just, when I started to get into this work in 2021, I saw very little impact on farmer well-being internationally to climate and ecological grief, which I found really surprising because farmers are, interacting with natural systems every day. And especially when there are natural disasters that have impacted crop production and livestock. This is, to me, kind of an obvious slide. Why would this type of stress and grief be more complex for farmers? Of course, farmers, like I said, they have a front row view to changes they're seeing on a daily, weekly, monthly, seasonal basis. Some of these changes that are impacting their yields, that are affecting their livelihood. Farmers are in Oregon, we've done some research. They're dealing with major financial losses due to ecological changes, increased pest predation, increased soil erosion, that type of thing. And then I wanted to mention the agrarian imperative that I'm guessing some of you are familiar with. It was coined in 2010 by Michael Rossman, who's a Midwestern agricultural, he's a farmer and an agricultural psychologist. He describes it as a basic human instinct to produce food and shelter required by families and communities. So the imperative, he argues, it compels farmers to work incredibly hard, to endure unusual pain and hardship, and to take uncommon risks. And if you work with farmers, if you are a farmer, you may recognize this quality. So I notice in farmers, including my husband, that they have this like inexplicable drive to produce food beyond what sometimes seems reasonable, even when they're facing incredible challenges. And most other people would leave a profession that was that fraught with hardship. So I think it's useful for us to understand. I think the imperative is really useful to understand how farmers are going to continue to drive to keep producing, even with additional obstacles. And that actually creates some vulnerability in them. And then finally, we know from the research that farmers are less likely to seek out mental health support than other populations. So what happens, and I'm guessing I don't quite know exactly who this audience, but I'm assuming you all, are really aware of some of the responses to unprocessed emotions. We know that mental health affects our ability to perform. So if we're not protecting our mental health, we're really not going to go very far. Um, and these are some of the potential behaviors and impacts of not processing difficult emotions. Um, I just wanted to call out the research of James Gross, a professor at Stanford, who did extensive research on what happens when people suppress negative feelings. He did a study where he exposed them to disturbing images and then he had them actively suppress those emotions. And he found that those people had issues with their short-term memory, with decision making. They were less able to come up with innovative ideas. And then the longer range impacts you can see here include burnout, drug and alcohol overuse, sometimes that frantic action, so that manic behavior. So we know from the research on ecological grief that people who talk about their emotions are more resilient. They feel more connected to their community, and they're actually more likely to take action. So we really see that talking about these emotions is important. Also, having a shared language, so having words like ecological distress, eco-anxiety. There's a fairly new word in the lexicon, solastalgia, that came out of Australia in the early 2000s, that describes the experience of homesickness when you're at home. So I've really seen this a number of times. I worked with some producers in New Mexico last spring or last winter, and the ranchers were talking about looking up at the brown hills and knowing they were home, but having this sense of unfamiliarity because they were used to seeing so much more snowpack. Um, and farmers in Oregon who talk about the lack of insect sounds, that they've seen this decimation in insect population, so it's much quieter on their farm. So again, it's this feeling of being home but kind of homesick. We also know, of course, that building community is so important. Having that sense of solidarity and support from other folks. Um, And then seeking out these states of resilience. So we know that we are having more frequent and greater states of distress. So we actually need to be intentionally cultivating these states of resilience that we're going to toggle back and forth in between. So just want to talk a little bit about the project that we're working on based at Oregon State University. We have a research component, and then we've also developed a couple of interventions. So we have been offering for the last 2 years online and in-person programs. We have two different interventions. One is a 30-minute kind of a PSA. It's just introducing people to these terms, really normalizing and validating the experience of ecological distress, and having people share a little bit, but it's very much of a light touch psychoeducation. And then we also offer a 75-minute workshop that goes a little bit more in depth and has some experiential information. We also last summer got funding to conduct research on the impacts of climate change on emotional and mental well-being on 46 farmers in Oregon. We did some in-depth interviews and focus groups, and we've been producing educational materials and resources on the topic. And then we received Train the Trainer funding to train ag service providers and mental health professionals and how to include some of these interventions in their own programming. Just a little bit about our workshop design. We use a strengths-based approach, so we always really affirm that when producers are in the room taking one of these workshops, they're already showing that they have resilient practices, they got out of bed that morning, they attended a workshop. So really focusing on the resilience that's already within people. There's lots of opportunities for self-reflection. I'll show you a couple of those examples in a minute. We encourage people to, instead of to counteract that sense of overwhelm, we encourage people to actually consider one specific loss that they've experienced. And that tends to be a helpful portal that people can actually access some of these difficult feelings as opposed to just being in this sort of, like I mentioned, that like disassociated state. Validating experiences, and then skill sharing. So we talk about resilience practices. So what are those states of resilience where people get a sense of joy, connection, and agency, where they can do things? And so we use that time in the intervention as a skill share. So, sharing what you know and what works for you with others in the room. And then finally, we, especially with the 30-minute, we found that the best practice is to embed it in larger programming. So we're not asking farmers to show up for a 3-hour or full day talk on mental health and ecological grief. We're just giving them a light touch. We have found, I believe, that 89% of the people that took the 30-minute, when they were surveyed, they actually wanted more training on grief and stress. Let's see. Oops. Okay, so a couple of the tools we use. This is the climate emotions wheel that comes out of Panu Pinkala's work. For people that aren't really familiar with the amazing nuances of emotions that we can experience, this can be really helpful. People are probably familiar with anger, sadness, and fear, but they may have never really talked about themselves as feeling overwhelmed or feeling empathy or feeling indignation. So this climate wheel we use in our interventions as kind of a primer for people to help them start to think about what are they feeling? And often it's many feelings at once. And that's, again, that complexity of ecological stress. The most common emotions that people talk about in our interventions are these: anxiety, frustration, despair, overwhelm, and guilt. There's always some positivity too, which is nice to see. We also use this model. This comes out of Ashley Consulo's work. She kind of talks about these 5 different types of ecological stress and grief, responding to slow onset changes like loss of ice and species, acute disasters, wildfires, floods, all of these extreme weather events that we're seeing. Vicarious grief, we're constantly have opportunities to experience vicarious grief, whether it's the fires in LA or hurricanes in the Southeast. Anticipatory grief is that kind of eco anxiety, like what's going to happen? What is the earth going to look like? Will it support life for my grandchildren? And then secondary grief. So we have these primary griefs, but then the secondary and tertiary are griefs that have to do with the loss of culture, family tradition, I often give the example of a farmer whose family used to go up on the weekends to a local lake and they'd fish and they get a break from the farm. They'd be out, out of cell phone range and they'd get that quality time together. And then I think a couple of years ago, the temperature in the lake got high enough that there was really very little fish population. So they stopped going because it was frankly depressing. To fish unsuccessfully, and so the primary loss is that fish population, but then the secondary loss has to do with what they lost as a family, these traditions, this break from the farm. And then, as I mentioned, we do this process where we have people talk about a specific loss. And these are just some of the examples of what people have shared. I'll just let you all read those yourselves. Unless you're tuning in. I guess I'll read them in case people are listening. Insects on the farm, consistency of seasons, relationships due to politics, places to fish, hope for the children's future, enjoyment of summer months, favorite camping places due to wildfire, irrigation reliability, farmers market customers due to smoke. And then we talk about resilience strategies. So we always end the interventions on a more positive note, but we let people feel their feelings, which is really important. And so, generally speaking, the resilience strategies fall into, like I said, the agency. What are you doing on your farm or in your community? To things like self-care or connecting with animals or friends, doing fun things. So playing music, for example, you can see on here, had lots of people that have some kind of artistic pursuit that brings them joy and connection. A couple others I just want to mention. A farmer talked about planting a pollinator garden and how, if anything's going wrong, if she just goes out and sits and watches the bumblebees like move from lavender plant to lavender plant, it just calms her nervous system. So she's that, and that's a great thing for a farmer to do because it can be challenging to go to a yoga class or, go on a retreat. But if you can build in things on your farm, often that have to do with animals, I hear time and again, people just, get a lot out of their pets and out of even their livestock. So just a little survey data so far. A lot of people don't know the terms ecological stress or grief when they come in. I didn't put those stats on here, but it's around half have never heard of these terms. And then they feel like they can explain them well. You can see about 3/4 say they intend to take one new step to manage their stress and grief. And then they also found that practice of identifying and naming a personal loss would help them to manage their stress and grief. A couple of things, I've already talked about this a bit, but we use the psychoeducation approach. So really believing that if we give people terms, if we normalize, validate these experiences, that in and of itself will have positive outcomes. We do use a trauma-informed approach. So in our interventions, we definitely give people an out. We encourage people to share if they want. We always have a co-facilitator who's available if someone needs to walk out and take space. And then we always make sure to provide mental health resources, including AgriStress, at the end of the talks. We did have farmers involved in the entire process. So we had farmers who helped us develop the curriculum and who've evaluated it throughout. And as I mentioned earlier, we found that a really great approach is to embed, especially the short 30-minute into larger programming. And then to have those experiential components where people can engage. So even that, like the climate emotions wheel, and then the 5 types of climate grief, we have people actually identifying. It's a way for people to start engaging with the material. So it stops being this like huge, universal, terrifying, overwhelming experience, and we can kind of like bring it down to a place where we can start to engage with it. So as I mentioned, we got funding for training the trainer. So we've had 4 trainings for our 30-minute presentation. And we've also had a cohort of folks that are now trained across the country who can lead that longer 75-minute intervention that has a little bit more there's more group processing. The 75-minute tends to elicit stronger feelings. Typically, people will cry or express anger. So, for people who were going to offer that 75-minute training, we wanted to do like a longer training period. Um, we have already I was out in New England this past fall doing some trainings around the New England states. As I mentioned, been to New Mexico and around the Northwest. Um, so the work is, yeah, there's interest in other parts of the region, other parts of the country as well. And then at OSU, at Oregon State, we have a transdisciplinary project right now on this topic. So we're working with people from the Department of Health, the Department of Psychology, fisheries, um, and the Forestry and Natural Resource Department. So we're actually starting to adapt some of the curriculum to other working lands and seas groups because so much of the work is transferable. It's really about people that are interacting consistently with natural systems that are seeing up close the losses, and that in many cases are financially dependent on those systems. And then exploring the indigenous perspective, recognizing that for most white people, this experience of this like collective trauma is new, at least in the last few generations in this country. But really wanting to recognize that this experience is not new for most indigenous people and for other populations as well. So bringing in that perspective in a very respectful way that's not more extraction. This is our website that we have, and I'll put that in the chat and share it with Carrie as well. Um, and I think that's all my slides. I also just wanted to mention that here, I'll stop sharing. Um, we do have a couple of upcoming trainings, and you're all more than welcome to join us. So there's one in February and then one in May. It's a 3-hour free training, and it would enable you to offer that 30-minute intervention, that kind of PSA model that I mentioned. And it provides you with all the slides, all the templates, even outreach materials. And we just go through the training and make sure people feel confident about delivering it. But it's just scripted, so it'd be really easy to incorporate. And that's it. So I used a little extra time, but I was granted a little extra time and happy to take questions if people have them.
Yeah, excellent. So I went ahead and put Maud's email address and then the upcoming events in the chat. But if you have questions for Maud, feel free to either go ahead and put them in the chat, or you can unmute and ask her yourself if you would like.
Yeah, and I'm happy I see someone's asking about the PowerPoint. I'm happy to share this slide deck with Carrie and have it
Excellent.
shared out. Yeah.
All right. I will go through the chat here. Okay, so PowerPoint.
Oh no, someone couldn't see it. I was sharing it. There is a new feature on Zoom where you actually have to click on the top. You have two options to look at what's being shared. So that may have
Yeah, that might, because
been
I
an
was able to
issue.
see it fine. Yeah.
But yeah, Constance, I'm happy to share out the slide deck. Sorry that you couldn't see it.
Yeah. We'll have Maud go ahead and send that to me, and we'll include it in the follow-up email that gives you all of the speakers' information and then the link to where the recording is as well. All right. Any questions for Maud?
I have a question. This is Lisa. I'm not able to put my camera on because I'm driving hands-free safely. But I have a quick
Yay.
question. Really loved the presentation. It really spoke to my heartstrings. I'm calling from Ohio. I'm curious to know what kind of collaborations you're looking to engage in or already engaged in. I know Ohio State has a farm stress program doing a lot of these kinds of things. I know Climate Psychology Alliance is doing a lot of these kinds of things, and I'm a part of both of those groups. Would love to make connections if they aren't already established, and I just don't know about them. But what you're doing is pretty awesome.
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, I am involved with CPNA. I'm on their ag workers committee, so I'll be helping present this winter. I think in January, they're gonna do something for for their folks. I'm not connected with Ohio State. I know I'm pretty connected with Penn State. And then, like I mentioned, the New England states I'm more connected with, but I'd love to be connected with Ohio State. So that would be fantastic.
I
It's been just sort of like through personal connections or, randomly we had 6 people from Penn State go through our cohort program. So that connection, it's a bit haphazard at this. I mean, it's not haphazard. It's just, it's like anything. It's like the networks and connections you have. So I'd love to get connected.
That's awesome. I'll do a follow-up email and I'll see you around the CPA neighborhood.
Wonderful. Thank you. And drive safe.
That's one of our favorite things, Maud, is the collaboration that comes from these meetings is
Awesome.
what we're striving for because and I know I say it all the time on here, guys, but we're all working towards the same goal. So why don't we work together? So
Yeah.
I love that that collaboration. Anybody else before we move to Miss Laura? All
Yeah.
right. Well, Maud might
Thanks,
stay on for
everyone.
just a few minutes in
Yeah.
case you have anything that comes
Great.
up. You can put it in the chat, and
Yeah.
then I'll make sure that I get all the information from her and get that sent on to you guys. So, as I said earlier, Miss Tara and Olivia were not able to make it this morning. So Laura's going to give us a brief overview of AgriSafe's mental health programs, and then we'll probably get you out of here a little bit early today. All right, Miss Laura, I'll let you take it away.
Yes, thank you. Hi, everyone. I know you always see me lurking here. I moderate for this. I've been with AgriSafe since 2021, and maybe you've seen me at one of the QPR trainings. Um, so yeah, I'm filling in today, so I'm going to share an overview of our mental health products. Maybe you know them, maybe some of them will be new, so I hope you learned something new while you're here. Like Carrie mentioned at the start, we have the helpline available in 11 different states. Our goal is to still hopefully one day make it national. But for now, it's just in Arizona, Colorado, Connecticut, Missouri, Montana, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Texas, Virginia, Washington, and Wyoming. If you need more information on it, you can go to our website, agrisafe.org, and then search the AgriStress helpline. You can also find all of our behavioral health stuff. If you can't see, I'm screen sharing the AgriSafe website. Just I know some people had issues viewing the PowerPoint earlier, so it's possible you can't see it. But if you go to current projects, and then it'll drop down and you'll see behavioral health, and that's where you can find all of our different mental health things. Products, I should say. And if you're interested in promoting the helpline, apologies for the scrolling. I know that can be kind of redundant to see. But if you go down to how can I get involved or help to market the helpline, you can go to sharing the helpline. And you can either choose to get a zip folder, which will get emailed to you from me a couple days after sending in your request, or you can go to the individual states page and select what you'd like to download, whether you want to post it on your website or if you want to post it on social media. Or if you want a poster, you can also download those. So those are those resources. Let's see, what's this one? I'll come to that one in a second. We've presented here on Farm Response before, but in case there's anyone new, I just want to share. It's a 3.5-hour continuing education course for behavioral professionals, behavioral health professionals. Honestly, also anyone else can take it. I'm not specifically just in the behavioral health field. My expertise is health communications, but I think it's just a great course. Certain states have grant funding that covers seats. Otherwise, the cost is $150 to take it, but it's really awesome if you haven't taken it. I highly recommend checking it out. And the list of states should be right here. So these are the states that currently offer free seats. So if you live in one of them, you should maybe come to the Farm Response page and check that out. This is what Tara and Olivia were going to talk about with you today. Calm conversations or counseling on access to lethal means. AgriSafe offers both options. We have 3 trainers, Olivia, Tara, and Linda. The conversations on access to lethal means is for general audiences. So just like QPR, which I'll share in a second, that one's about an hour to 2 hours. And the one for behavioral health professionals is about 3.5 to 4 hours. That one offers CEs, and that's counseling on access to lethal means. Um, I know we'll have some coming up next year. We don't have any currently scheduled that I'm aware of. But you're always welcome to request a training from us, and I'll share the request a training page in a moment. We alternate our conversations and QPR. We're taking a break for the holidays, but next year, again, we normally alternate. 1 month we'll do the other month we'll do QPR. Virtually, they do fill up fast though. And of course, QPR, question, persuade, and refer, an hour and a half for any audience with an ag focus on preventing suicide, gatekeeping suicide. It's another great training. And we also offer CEs for multiple disciplines for that one. And if you'd like to request a training, if again you're on the AgriSafe homepage, you can go to Learning Opportunities and there's a Request a Training area. You can do a custom training request. So maybe you're with an ag commodity group and you want something specific for corn growers, we can tailor it to that. Or maybe there's a training we don't have listed, but we can help secure a presenter for you on that, or you can request existing trainings. And I'll make sure to put this link in the chat in a moment. We have a lot. So if you're like, man, I really want this live, like because I know personally I like watching live trainings over watching recorded ones. So you're always welcome to request one, and we'll talk to you about prices, whether we have funding to do it for free or not. And you can specify whether you want it in person or on site. But this really exciting thing that I'm going to share, the last one, is the AgriStress Provider Directory. So you've probably heard about it. For the providers, it's anyone who's taken Farm Response gets the opportunity to join this directory for free. But we just did our national announcement for the general public that they can search it and find mental health providers. We're using the term counselors specifically. We did kind of audience testing to see should we use behavioral health or mental health or therapist, and we found that counselor got the most positive response and most understanding with our ag audiences. So if someone is taking Farm Response and they're a licensed counselor, they have the opportunity to be listed here for free, and we've started marketing it now. We just did an RFD TV interview about it. We did a press release. So people can search it for providers, either searching by category, age, language, specific specialties, or I'll go back to the homepage. They can search by location. So let's say I want to see, I'll do Virginia. That's where I'm from. And so it'll pull up people in Virginia. So that's awesome. I think we have 48 or 49 states represented right now, and a lot of these providers can offer virtual services, and a lot of them are licensed to do that across states. So there's a lot of options here, even if people can't find someone in their own state. So also, if you're a behavioral health provider and you're looking to be listed for free on this directory and you haven't taken Farm Response, you should hop on that, because again, you can make your account for free if you've taken Farm Response. And I guess maybe you've already seen it, but it's just 3.5 minutes, so I'll go ahead and share the interview that Olivia did with RFD TV. Since I have it pulled up, let me just enable it so it has optimized sound. All right.
Holiday season, it is upon us, and while it's a joyful time for most, it can also bring a...
Oops.
A lot of stress, especially for those who may be struggling, that is, with mental health. And a new network directory is now making it easier for rural residents to find support. AgriSafe Network Behavioral Health Coordinator Olivia Burry joins us now. Thank you, Olivia, for being here. You know, listen, we hear a lot about rising stress levels in agriculture. Maybe you can tell us what farmers and ranchers are facing right now when it does come to mental health. What are you hearing?
Sure. Producers today are facing a wide variety of stressors right now. The unpredictable weather, the market shifts, the family pressures, and the prices. You know, it all adds up and influences those stress levels. And then these stressors will start to stack up, often in these isolated rural environments, which is only going to then increase the risk for anxiety, for depression, and certainly for that burnout. And often these many producers, they will hesitate to seek the help that they need because of the stigma that they're experiencing, or just a lack of providers who understand agriculture.
Well, they need to know, of course, right? The resources are out there. AgriSafe, they have launched the AgriStress Provider Directory. Tell us about this for viewers who might not know exactly what this is.
Well, our strong farms start with strong farmers. So at AgriSafe, we want our rural communities to know that there is confidential, compassionate support. It is available for them. So the AgriStress Provider Directory is a nationwide searchable tool that connects these farmers, the ranchers, and their families with licensed mental health providers who are trained in farm culture, the values, the stressors, and there might be some providers outside the industry who aren't familiar with the unique pressures in ag. So it's important for our farmers and ranchers and farm workers to just connect with providers who truly understand their world and can meet them with where they're at.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. I think sometimes there's a disconnect, and I think sometimes producers go, well, what do they know about what I'm going through? So let's talk about the kind of training that these providers listed in this directory receive to help them really understand agricultural values and stressors.
Yeah, certainly. So all the providers listed in our directory, they complete the AgriSafe's Farm Response training. And Farm Response is a on-demand 3.5-hour continuing education course developed by national experts from the AgriStress Response. So it's also recognized by the Suicide Prevention Resource Center. So this is a specialized program that teaches clinicians about the farm culture, stressors, maybe the communication styles that really resonates with this particular community, and just the realities of production agriculture. So this knowledge is very critical for a healthcare professional to care for a farmer's total health effectively.
And the way to get that, directory.agrisafe.org. That's the place to go to find the information. Olivia, thank you so much for what you do, for joining us today. So important, especially this time of year. A lot, of course, weighing on so many. Appreciate you being here. AgriSafe Network Behavioral Health Coordinator, that is Olivia Burry. Again, thank you.
All right. So there's that. Thank you for sticking around and listening. And there's one more training I want to mention that we started doing recently. We don't have a page for it yet. We're working on it, but it is the depopulation stressors and resiliency, since that is a huge area that impacts a lot of our farmers and ranchers with all of these natural disasters that are happening. Same thing with different diseases coming and changing. So that's another training we've recently been building up and presenting. So once that page is up, we'll share it with everyone. We'll make an announcement to our email list, so keep your eyes out for that. But yeah, that's what I had to share. I went
All right.
what I meant, but yeah.
Laura, we did have one question, and I don't know if you can remember all of them offhand, but how many or which of our project offers continuing education credits? So I know Nurse Scholar does, and I thought Farm Response also does. I just didn't know about the other.
Farm Response, Nurse Scholar, some of our webinars do. All of the National Farm Safety and Health Week webinars offered each one individually is 1 hour of continuing education, general.
Is it listed on our site? Like if they go to those projects, it's listed on there that they can see it? Okay.
You should be able to, hold on, I'm going to pull up the Learning Lab and I'm going to start screen sharing again for y'all. Okay, so when you're on the Learning Lab, you should be able to filter by CEs.
Oh,
So
excellent.
let's see, continuing medical education, I can hit find and it'll pull up the ones that have those CMEs. And we always make sure to go through once those expire, we remove it so it won't show up if they aren't accurate. So same thing, if you want the CHW CEs, you're able to filter, oh, but you'll have to uncheck the other one or those will pull up too. So you'll see those. So you should be able to filter in our learning lab. And I will make a note that in 2026, we will be shifting gears to a new learning lab. But we will make sure that the transition goes very smoothly and everyone will know about it before it happens and we'll prepare you for it. We'll continue offering CEs. Your experience just might look a little different. But for now, you can still search learning.agrisafe.org for those CEs. Also, on our webpage, you can, under learning opportunities, there is continuing education, and we have it split up right now for CHWs and nurses. And this one just says it's continuing education. But it looks like this is pulling up. Well, yeah, it's pulling up all the CEs. So you can also look on our website. The Learning Lab is also our website, but you can look at agrisafe.org or learning.agrisafe.org to find those CEs.
Yeah, we have so much information, and I know sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming when you're looking at it all, but there's really anything and everything that you could possibly need on there. In the chat, Lisa Nasland, can you expand on that just a little bit? Are you talking about if AgriSafe is connected with all of their programs to Iowa State Extension? Is that what you're meaning?
Or if Iowa State Extension is familiar with AgriSafe and like all this information and what AgriSafe has to offer.
Okay.
I don't know how all of that works within your business stuff, but
We
being rural Iowa, we're so distanced
Yeah.
from so much of this stuff that this is where I see a great concern, especially most recently. So I know that Iowa State Extension is a great resource that a lot of our communities use. And I'm just very excited with what AgriSafe has to offer in the whole great big picture. So,
Yes, thank you. My coworker Linda Emanuel was at MRASH earlier and I think MRASH is the Midwest Rural Agricultural Health and Safety. I might have completely gotten that. No, that was what it's called, their conference, and that was in Amana, Iowa. And we do have connections with Iowa Center for Agricultural Safety and Health. I don't know if that's the same as Iowa Ag Extension, if they're connected or not, but we do have some connections in Iowa for sure.
Yeah, Lisa, maybe if you're comfortable with it, maybe you could connect us with them and we can offer all of our resources for them to use and vice versa. They may have something that we would like to post as well.
absolutely. And that was a thought I had too, that you could probably benefit from them as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I will get back in touch and see if we can develop something there. So
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
yeah,
Right.
I know sometimes the Midwest kind of gets
It does, doesn't it? That's where I'm at.
yeah,
Missouri.
and so I'm very passionate about getting our
We are
rural
slow to get
farmers.
any information.
Yes, yes. So, and the impact, we're seeing a lot more of the farmer suicides. We're seeing a lot more. I mean, just everything is elevating, it seems like, and we just can't get enough out there fast enough. So,
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
so thank you for what you're doing here. This is absolutely
Yeah.
fabulous.
Thank you for that. Does anybody else have any questions? You can either unmute or put your question in the chat, whichever one you feel comfortable with.
Laura, thank you for sharing. That's an incredible resource. I'm just curious to know, I'm a physical therapist and I actually just retired from the VA hospital system and saw the impact of musculoskeletal injuries on mental health. And I've pivoted now. I run a virtual physical therapy practice in New York State, really with my goal of being there when somebody's injured so that that doesn't progress into a more chronic condition that weighs on mental health. I just got done working with a man who runs a very large dairy farm in central New York, and right during harvest season, he ends up with a raging bit of sciatica. And I think it was Maud who mentioned earlier, farmers are just going to power through. They're going to do what they need to do to get it done. And unfortunately, that progressed his situation. I was able to get and do some telehealth visits with him right in his barn at home, and we were able to get him to the care that he needed. And so if you're ever interested in adding, a musculoskeletal component to that list, a directory of providers, be glad to help do that. So thank you.
That is great. Thank you. I'll pass that along to Tara and Olivia since they're the ones in charge of that, but that's fantastic. And even if not, we do have a page for musculoskeletal health, and that would be a good even a good topic for our podcast too, for talking total farmer health. So I'll at the very least reach out to you about the podcast, maybe having
Sounds good.
That's really important too.
Glad to do it. I'll put my email in the chat.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
That's excellent. I love this, guys. I did just put in the chat, you guys know that I have to do a lot of research to find our unique speakers, and I can't find them all out there just perusing the internet. So if you have referrals of these little hidden projects that are so amazing, we would really like to get them out there and share them with our audience. So if you could email me, I put my email in the chat there, and let me know that, hey, I think this would be a great one, or I have a project I think I'm ready to go ahead and present on. We would absolutely love to put you in the calendar, and that helps me spread the message about your project as well. All right, I think if that is it, we will go ahead and end today. Remember, usually within 24 hours, we will go ahead and get out the contact information and the recording link that is on YouTube. So go ahead and look for that. And we always love for you to share it with your colleagues, invite them. We have really grown this meeting, to a good quantity for live attendance. So we really, really appreciate that every month. So, all right, everyone, I can't believe I'm saying this. Next time we will see you, it will be the new year in 2026. You have the most wonderful December and holiday season you could possibly have. Love ya, and see you in January.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye, Carrie.